John Bell Edwards appeared to be in no mood to discuss how a man could defeat multiple layers of security to enter the governor's mansion, then fall asleep on a couch.
I do mind.
The man may have been in the mansion undetected for hours. According to booking records, security finally noticed 34-year-old Raynard Green laying on a sofa around 6 last Wednesday morning. An antique wooden table was broken near where Green was sleeping. The record described the location of the incident only as a governmental building. Tuesday, Governor Edwards spoke briefly about the extraordinary breach of security at a luncheon in Baton Rouge.
I'm not going to address any specific information relative to that. There's still an open investigation the state police is conducting.
Department of Public Safety officers arrested Green and placed him in leg shackles as he was becoming extremely violent. They found a small amount of synthetic marijuana in his front pocket. According to the state police, Green also assaulted 2 officers. The governor would not say if he and his family were in the mansion during the incident.
I appreciate what the state police have always done for me and my family in keeping us safe. At no time were we anything other than safe.
The governor's mansion is surrounded by a tall iron fence, and there's only one entrance gate. The property is supposed to be guarded by state troopers whenever the governor and his family are here. There's a call box at the front gate where visitors press a buzzer. Security asks the person through an intercom to state their business and decides whether to give that person access to the mansion. Troopers are not revealing how Green got in. The LSP is evaluating security procedures for potential areas of improvement. In Baton Rouge, Paul Murphy, Eyewitness News.
Raynard Green now faces a long list of charges, including simple burglary, trespassing, criminal damage to property, and battery on a police officer.